A common failing of cheap freight car models is their use of cast-on details like ladders, grab irons, and even running boards. Can these cheap models be improved? Welcome back to my channel, and as always, thanks to my subscribers. This is my 7th video showing how I rebuild cheap freight cars to make them suitable for any HO scale layout. But all of those previous videos were primarily focused on replacing missing parts and on repainting. In today's video, I am revisiting the topic of rebuilding old freight cars, but this video will focus on replacing those cast-on details with separately applied, detailed parts. This boxcar is fairly typical of low-end HO scale freight car models. It is a model of a 40-foot PS1 boxcar with 5.5 dreadnought ends, truck-mounted horn hook couplers, metal wheels on plastic axles, cast-on stirrup steps, hand grabs, and ladders, and cast-on underbody brake detail. This car has a removable running board, which will make replacing it much easier. My plan for this car is as follows. I will replace the truck-mounted couplers with body-mounted KD couplers. I will replace the original trucks with Intermountain all-metal wheel sets in AccuRail side frames. I will remove the cast-on stirrup steps and replace them with more realistic steps. I will remove the cast-on ladders and hand grabs and replace them with separate parts. And finally, I will replace the rooftop running board with a more detailed running board. There is a fair amount of cast-on detail on the car ends, which I will not try to replace. This is for 3 reasons. First, the car ends are less noticeable when the car is on the layout. Second, removing these details from the corrugated steel detail is incredibly difficult and time-consuming. It would be easier just to cut off the car end and replace it. Third, I'm far too lazy to take the necessary effort. I'm not going to show how I replace the trucks or the truck-mounted couplers, or even how I replace the stirrup steps. I have covered those topics in my previous videos. Instead, I will focus on how I removed the cast-on details from the car body and replaced them with more realistic parts. Once I had the car body completely disassembled, the first thing I did was to remove the stirrup steps and smooth the places where they were attached. Then I drilled the mounting holes for new stirrup steps. Next, I needed to fill the original running board mounting holes in the roof. And to do that, I cemented short pieces of styrene to the underside of the roof. These provide support for the putty I used to fill the holes. Once the putty had cured, I sanded the patches smooth. Next, I removed the cast-on details, starting with the running board supports on the car ends. Once I had the supports removed, I sanded any remnants of the cast-on detail using sanding sticks and fine grit sandpaper. I continued cutting away cast-on details, first the hand grabs, then the cast-on ladders. In this view and in subsequent views, I am using a styrene chisel from Micromark, but I have since decided that a number 17 blade is just as effective, and it is easier to control. Once I had removed the cast-on details as best I could, I gave the entire car body a light spray of primer. I used Tamiya light gray spray primer. The primer will show any remaining imperfections on the surface of the car body. I removed these imperfections with my finest sanding stick, 600 grit, and with some 1200 grit sandpaper. By sanding down to the bare plastic, which is black on this model, you can be sure you have removed all of the cast-on detail, and you'll have a good surface for attaching the detail parts. Notice that as I was cutting away the cast-on details, I damaged some of the rivet detail. I cut some narrow strips of 5/1000 styrene sheet and glued them in place to form the rivet bosses. Later on, I'll show you how I replaced the rivets. The KD running board has 8 mounting pins cast on the underside, but trust me, you do not want the aggravation of trying to drill 8 holes in the precise pattern required. I clipped off the mounting pins, and I will glue the running board onto the cast-on running board supports. I sanded the running board supports with my longest sanding stick to be sure they were even and level. But there are more modifications required. The end angle supports include horizontal mounting pins. These need to be sliced off to allow the angle supports to fit around the 40-foot long car. Also, there are small support pins on the bottom of the wings, and on this particular car, they extend beyond the car roof, so I cut those off as well, and I cemented short lengths of 30/1000 square strip to support the wings. Now it was time to start attaching detail parts, and attaching the running board was the most difficult task. There are separately applied, pre-installed hand grabs on the KD running boards, and they are incredibly delicate. I used rubber bands to hold the running board in position, and when I was happy with the placement, I tacked the part in position with styrene cement. After the glue had set, about 20 minutes, I removed the rubber bands carefully and glued the running board to each of the supports. I also glued the end angle supports to the car ends. Once that glue had set, I glued the wings to their supports. I did not use wire hand grabs for this project. Instead, I used these bracket-style hand grabs from Tichy, which are more appropriate for metal-sided cars. They have teeny tiny pins cast on the back side, but again, I didn't even try to drill holes for these pins. Instead, I sliced them off with a razor blade and glued the brackets to the side of the car. I used these ladders, also from Tichy. They have small bosses cast on the back side of the ladder rails to make them stand away from the car body. Since there is not a lot of gluing surface for these ladders, it is especially important to sand away the primer and any underlying paint before gluing. With all of the detail parts installed, it's time to prime the entire car body. Make many quick, light passes with the spray and build up the primer slowly. Spray at all different angles to be sure the primer is applied underneath the details. I use this car body holder while painting. It makes it easy to hold the model at any angle. Once the primer has cured, it's time to replace the rivets. I use these 3D resin rivets by Archer Fine Transfers. They come in a variety of sizes and patterns. Like any decal, they don't adhere well to unpainted styrene, which is why I primed the car body first. All that's left is to paint, apply decals, and assemble the car. I have covered all of these procedures in other videos, so I won't bore you by repeating them here. I will provide links to some of those videos at the end. In the description below this video, you'll find links to many of the products and tools I've mentioned. I love to read your comments and to respond to your questions. If you want to see more videos of this type, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.